Today I'm talking to Philip VanDusen. He's a branding consultant serving small businesses and entrepreneurs. He was previously VP of Design at PepsiCo and Old Navy and an executive creative director at Landor Associates. As a thought leader, Philip shares his expertise in brand building on YouTube with his hundreds of thousands of subscribers, in the Brand Muse newsletter and Bonfire Mastermind community, and on the Brand Design Masters podcast. And Philip's interested in a lot of different cool things around personal branding, design, and AI. And I think we're just going to have a great conversation. So welcome, Philip.
Thanks, Evan. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, it's great to meet you. So you started off, you were just telling me you started off as a painter.
Yeah.
And so you were an artist, and then you kind of got into the professional side. I mean, not a lot of people start off as an artist and then go and become successful in business, in my experience. They're usually kind of different. And someone that can straddle those worlds, that's kind of cool. How did this all happen?
Painfully, actually. It was not a well thought out or strategic decision at the beginning. Much like you, I reached a point in my career where I had gotten a degree in painting and I had been teaching painting a little bit. And then I realized that that career was not going to be a long-lived one. It was like being a migrant worker. You kind of like got a teaching sabbatical and then we're out of work 9 months later. So I, like you, woke up one day and said, hey, I got to learn all this business stuff. And so I had been doing a lot of monotypes while I was teaching at a university in France, and came back to the United States, moved to New York City, and started a t-shirt company and put all my monotype prints on t-shirts and started selling them around boutiques in Manhattan. And so I kind of fell into the t-shirt industry. And then over time, I worked for larger and larger t-shirt companies, eventually landing at Old Navy right when they were starting off, and managed and grew their t-shirt business to be a $700 million a year business. And was in the fashion industry for about 12 years, where I also learned kind of trend forecasting, and then made the jump over to the agency side and learned branding and brand strategy, et cetera. So it was not I like to say it was more of a web of a career than a ladder. But I eventually ended up, in executive leadership roles in terms of leading design and creative professionals in what they do.
So you find yourself all of a sudden you're an executive, you're a leader of these teams of people. You're good at branding, you're good at design, you're looking at trends, and then all of a sudden AI crashes on the scene. What happens in your mind when you see it?
Well, AI crashed on the scene after I had left corporate, and I've been an independent consultant for the last 8 years. And so AI has kind of crashed onto my scene anyway in just the last few years. And my clients now are, as you said, small to medium-sized businesses and entrepreneurs and startups. I also do a lot of work coaching and mentoring creative professionals. And I built my business, my consultancy, through content marketing. So my YouTube channel, my podcast, my newsletter. I have a brand strategy course. And so where I got my clients was through developing content. And so when ChatGPT shows up, and well, I mean, first of it was Stable Diffusion and some of the generative AI image making platforms, which I wasn't at the beginning very impressed by. I mean, I thought that they looked a little contrived and very obvious. And I knew it was going to put a lot of illustrators out of work. But there wasn't much application for me in terms of what I did. But then when, the more, the platforms like ChatGPT and Gemini, et cetera, and Claude started really kind of building up speed, that's when I started to recognize how those platforms were really going to help me generate a lot more content a lot more easily.
All right, maybe we can just do a few, I don't know, like touch-ins of like definitions or how you see things like branding and personal branding and design and content and so forth. And then maybe we can dive into, using AI to support them. Is that okay?
Sure, let's do it.
What is branding?
I love that question. Branding is, there's some famous quotes to say your brand is what people say about you when you leave the room. And a brand really is the space that you occupy in people's hearts and minds. Um, a brand isn't a logo, a brand isn't a product, a brand is a kind of a byproduct of all of those things. It's essentially the the emotional feel that you have, the uh that it's, you really caught me off guard on that one. You would think I know how you
Well, I
would
got a
think I
few
know
more.
how to describe it really succinctly, but I don't. Um, a brand is really everything that you feel and remember about any kind of experience. And so that experience can be with an individual. So if you're kind of feeling the a brand of an individual, a personal brand, if you have an experience with a laundry detergent that your mom used to use, and that is a pleasurable experience and you have a lot of history around that product, your brand experience in that might be very long lived and intertwined with your memory of your parents and your upbringing, along with the fact that it makes your life easier because it gets your clothes clean, gets all the stains out of them. So a brand is an experience, and your memory of that experience, essentially what you carry with you about that experience.
Yeah, excellent. And then what is brand building? How do you build one of these things?
That's it. Actually, there's a bit of art and a bit of science in that. Uh, just like building a business, when you architect a business plan, you do research about the category of business that you're going to be in and who your competition is and who else is doing what you're thinking of doing, who you're going to sell to, what your product is, why it's better, why it's different, how much it costs, the problem that it's going to solve for people. Building a brand is exactly like that. To a certain extent, you approach branding just like you approach building a business,
Hmm.
because it's a brand is based on delivering some sort of value to somebody, and it's solving somebody's problem. And that, in its very base form, then translates into what is the thing that represents your brand? Is that a package on a shelf? Is it a speech that you're giving in front of people? Is your brand a television show that people experience in terms of entertainment? What is the thing? And then how do you show up? Where do you show up? How do you show up? Is it, how frequent is it? What are those touch points that people have when they experience your brand? Is that walking down the aisle of a grocery store? Is it going to a conference? Is it turning on the television? It could be any number of things. And so, architecting or building a brand, you start off with just about everything that I just described. So, you start off with the value, who it's for, why you're better, why you're different. And then you decide on what you're going to look like when you show up, how you show up, where you show up, and how you deliver that experience to people.
Okay, great. And then I realized that we're, getting into kind of like the basics or
The
the essences here.
esoterica,
Say
in a
again?
way. I said it's the esoterica for
Yeah.
non-branding people anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I want to connect up here, right? Because we started with, what is a brand, then we went to brand building. Now, what about personal branding and my experience? Because I work with a lot of people who want to build their personal brands. A lot of times people have a real challenge with this one of kind of getting outside themselves or looking at themselves objectively or from their client's perspective. So, what is personal branding? And then how does one do this?
Yeah, I mean, there are companies that have a person who is the figurehead or the personal brand who reflects on that company.
Yes.
Colonel Sanders comes to mind, or Elon Musk, or Richard Branson. Or Steve Jobs. I mean, these are people who are iconic personalities who embody their brand experience in a human being. So
Yes.
there are people who are figureheads or faces of corporations. The corporation is a brand. The person is a kind of a personal brand in association with corporate entity.
Hmm.
Um, and then there are people like you and me who are individual consultant sort of folks or coaches or um, freelancers who need to market ourselves and our products and services to companies or individuals or whoever we deliver those things to. And we have to be memorable. We have to be visible. We have to establish our credibility. We have to establish our authority. And how we do that, what are the mechanisms that we use in order to do that? And how do we make sure that that becomes imprinted on the people that we are targeting with their goods and services? All of those things essentially are what you need to intentionally architect when you're building a personal brand or a brand around a single individual.
Excellent. These are great. These are great definitions and wonderful summaries.
I'm
So
getting a little better with my definitions than at the very beginning when you hit me with the brand one. Yeah. So I'm warming up. Okay. Let's go.
okay, what is what? Okay, define what. Okay, so I think at this point, maybe it's useful then to, kind of bridge over into AI a little bit here. So, how does one now use, some of these spectacular new innovations, called generative AI to do branding and brand building and personal branding? And how are you doing it?
Yeah, I mean, AI, if we record this today and then tomorrow AI's changed. I mean, it's
Yeah.
moving so fast and so quickly. It's like the computer industry in its infancy, right? And so everything is dated a week later. And so one of the things about AI that I'm just super amazed by is how it is infiltrating literally every part of society. It's infiltrating websites in the form of chatbots or website building, website builders, which are based in AI. There is email marketing. There's customer persona building for brand strategists. There are, I was just pitched to sponsor a AI platform that does presentation design. So, slide design. Um, People are using it in terms of, content development. Uh, it's just everywhere and it's in everything. I mean, the interesting thing, Eben, is that it's starting to move into the territory of greenwashing to me. Remember when everything was green and eco and like before you know it, like every company was or gluten free, like everything's gluten free
Yeah.
or everything's recyclable or everything's made of post-consumer content. And every company was getting on the green bandwagon. And so pretty soon every company, whether they were, they could be the perfect example of greenwashing to me is British Petroleum, who redid their logo. It looks like a beautiful green sunflower, right? It's like greenwashing on steroids.
Yeah.
And so that that is kind of where AI is. Like there are companies and software products that are hyping the fact that they're driven by AI when they're not doing anything that they were doing differently 5 years ago. And so but I think that AI is incredibly important and it's so pervasive. Um, it's only a question of what you need to have done to make your life and your job easier in your business and how you can then utilize AI in a form that actually truly does that. In my particular case, I'm leveraging AI in terms of content development. So it's helping me with initial YouTube scripts or ideation or concepts for newsletters. It's particularly great at coming up with subject lines for emails.
Yes.
Can I get 10 clickable, email subject lines for this email and I'll paste in the email? When I used to have to kind of labor over those things for hours and hours. And it was just so incredibly painful. And certain things like that, it's just making, incredibly easy. And so, in terms of what it's doing, and we started before we actually hit record, I want to come back to that conversation about AI is making it actually more difficult for people to do things than easier. In some cases, I want to hear what you were thinking about on that. But for me, right now, AI has been super helpful in terms of developing content.
So you're making a great point here, and I mentioned to you kind of right before we flipped on the recording and so forth that I just read an article, and we're recording this right now in August of 2024. But I just read an article that 77% of workers are saying that AI is making them less productive right now, and that it just kind of shook me for a minute because I realized, oh, I mean, if you've got this conception that it's making everyone more productive, but most people have the conception that it's making themselves less productive, then there's somebody's missing something somewhere right here.
I think it's because we're right in the middle of the learning curve. I mean,
Yes.
one of the things that I have experienced because I work so closely with lots of creative professionals is what I like to call the big freak out. Right now we're in the big freak out mode. And I've been through this before when the compute I'm old enough to know and have experience when computers were born and when they came about and how they absolutely disrupted the public publishing and the publishing industry. And so when that happened, suddenly everyone was freaking out saying the publishing industry is dead and graphic designers are dead. No one's going to be able to get a job anymore. And then we realized about 3 years later that we needed more graphic designers than ever. And that this was actually giving us a gigantic new toolkit to work with to produce media. And so but at that one kind of like pivotal watershed moment, Eben, when desktop publishing became a thing, everybody got less productive for a period of time because they were making that transition from doing waxers and paste up and linotype and all these terms that no one who's listening to this knows what that means, but it's back when publishing was actually a manual kind of activity, and then everything becoming digital because all of those people who did that manual activity had to learn computers and had
Yes.
to also navigate the amazingly fast waterfall of capabilities that computers were throwing at us every single day. And that's, I think, exactly where we are with AI right now, is that everyone who is producing media or doing things that now are the things that AI can help with, they are being told by their bosses, do this with AI, do this with AI, you'll be more productive, use this thing, use that thing. Oh, shiny object, squirrel, like use that thing over there. And suddenly they're trying to navigate this and figure out, okay, what are the programs or the capabilities that I can actually use that are going to actually help me. And oh, I have to use it for the first, second, third, fourth time. And I don't know about you, but the first time I started plugging prompts into Chat GPT, it was like it was like a whole new world, but I had to learn a whole new capability set to actually make it do what I wanted it to do. And
Yes.
so that's where I think we are right now.
Yes. Agreed. And yeah, I guess the second part of that thought was that while maybe most people are finding it's making them less productive, at least at work, my experience is that when I use it, the email subject line is an excellent example because I've been doing marketing for 25 or 30 years. And you're right. I mean, you can sit down and have it write 10 subject lines or 50 or 100 or however many you want. And then you can say, oh, no, you know what? Make them a little bit less, flashy, or make them a little bit more futuristic. Or yeah, I mean, you can tweak and then it'll just make you 20 more. And you can kind of tune at the meta level. If you've ever done any kind of copywriting or marketing, to get the ideas, to just be able to have it generate the ideas, it can literally do in seconds what used to take hours for the right things, right? I think of it as, to me, it's my bullet train. I'm walking through life, and then every once in a while, I just go, you know what? I want to jump like 6 hours ahead, and I just jump on the bullet train and ride that for 20 minutes, and then boom, I've arrived at my next location. But you have to have a sense of it. It's kind of like using Google or using a piece of software or something. You have to know when to use it, and then know how to use it, and then know when to get off of it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think to a certain extent, it's like you got to learn how to be a creative director because I mean, you're essentially coaching this thing through developing something for you. And inevitably, the first thing it gives you is not right. And so
Yes.
you have to go back and ask for revisions. And then you got to ask for revisions to revisions. And then you want 5 versions of that revision so you can then choose one of them. And so we're now all learning how to be creative directors and to give meaningful, actionable feedback to an inanimate machine. And learning how to do that is a learning curve that we're all on right now. I mean, I'm getting a lot better at coaching ChatGPT to give me the sort of things that I want out of it these days than I was 3 months ago. And I'm also starting to realize you know, where and how far I can push it, and where I just have to take over myself and say, okay, good enough. You go to sleep now. I'm going to make this me. Because I think that's one of the biggest things about AI right now for me, Evan, is that yes, it's going to make producing content a lot easier for all sorts of companies. But what's going to become even more important is brand voice and the differentiation of brand voice. How are we going to humanize or individualize this content that these things are producing for us?
Mm. So that's you brought up kind of a paradox here, right? You have to make brand voice important and humanizing brand voice, but you're not using a human to do it.
No, you are. I think that you are using a human to do it.
Oh,
I think that editing process, once you are given the good enough thing, you are then going to have to go in and edit it or inject um, the personality of the brand into it. Now, that said, there are, ways to build your own GPT now. So you can basically feed and populate your own mini GPT with your brand essence, including your brand voice. So when it does produce something for you, it's going to do a better job of doing it or get it closer to where you need it to be. Um, a perfect example is, I do a newsletter called Brand Muse, and I've been doing it for about 8 years. And there's usually about a 200, 300 word little story at the beginning of the email. And it's usually I use a quirky human interest story as a launching pad, as a diving board into a lesson about branding or marketing. It's kind of, I use a metaphor at the end, kind of make a little twist, and so it makes learning a lesson about branding or marketing fun. And so in my case, coming up with whatever that quirky human interest story was that was a sort of story that could be an interesting metaphor for something in branding and marketing, finding that story for me took hours.
mm.
And now I'm able to, I've gotten really good at figuring out how you prompt to get a list of these stories that I can then read and choose from and decide, okay, this is the good one that I want to like write my thing around. And that's one of those things where something that literally used to take me hours, it takes me almost no time now.
But then you have to tune it
I have to tune it.
to actually take the kind of the current
Be
the
my
germ or
voice.
the kernel to make it in your voice. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I've tried to like coach it how to write like I write. And by feeding it, taking 20 of my old brand muses and plugging it into it and saying, this is my style of writing. And here's this, human interest story. And here's the metaphor I want to make to this sort of kind of marketing idea. Now write me the thing. And, sometimes it does a halfway decent job to it, but there's not been a single time where I haven't had to go in there and do some major rewrites to kind of get it to feel like me to me.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Okay, quick action step here. So the key is learning how to prompt better. You start out prompting by just asking questions and talking to AI like it's a helper, but you quickly realize that getting better at prompting is a huge accelerator and game changer for your own success in life. So these prompts will not only help you get a lot more done faster and accelerate your success, but they'll also help you really get prompting and get better at it. You can get all of these as a gift from me just by going to metamind.co/gift. That's metamind.co/gift. And I'll put that link below, and then just opt in to get it. I've also created a powerful video for you called AI in the Future of Business and Work and Success that demonstrates some of the key mindsets and prompting strategies to help you get up to speed and get a lot more out of generative AI. And it's also included as a free gift when you register. So just head over to metamind.co/gift to get your AI Accelerator prompt pack and the other free goodies. All right, back to our interview. And also, just speaking, putting on my kind of marketing cap right now, when you're creating a marketing piece or a newsletter or any kind of a communication or designing a talk, right? It's really about finding the essence of it. It's about finding the angle and the way you're positioning it and kind of the entry point and how you're grabbing attention. And there's like a DNA or something that you have to establish. There's like a superstructure or like a blueprint that you have to get these pieces right. And then you build it. Now, people who don't have experience with this, because they haven't done it, they don't understand how that's more important than the execution in a lot of cases, because you need to have that essence, right? But then once you start using the generative AI and you learn how to get it to collaborate with you, it can give you a bunch of ideas for those essential starting points, I think is kind of what you're saying. And it can help you ideate and kind of look at the situation from a lot of perspectives and go, there's the seed of my starting point. And then you can leap off from there. And then even though it didn't kind of do all the work for you, it did this substantial piece that you can then pick it up and add your magic to. Right? That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, it is. And I think that it's that distillation that you're talking about, which is the human part. And that is where our human brains at the moment have no match as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. I'll actually make a analogy to painting. Okay. So when I was a painter, I used to paint big 5x6 foot canvases. And when I started off, I would have a gessoed white gigantic canvas in my studio. And in your brain, you already have some sort of preconception of what you might want to do with it. But there's a moment that I called it white canvas syndrome, where there's so many, you're looking at a white canvas and there's nothing but possibilities and you don't have anything to react to. Yes. So my technique for that was to just get some paint and make a whole bunch of marks on the canvas, just like get something on it. Because as soon as I broke the whiteness and created something, even if it was meaningless, it gave me something to react to, because painting is very much of a push and pull sort of activity. You know, you're adding, you're subtracting, you're highlighting, you're pushing something back. And I think any kind of creative activity, when it comes to generating content in any form, is that sort of push and pull activity. And so generative AI to me gives you those messy marks that break the white of the canvas. And then you can go in and then start really doing the pushing and pulling to turn it into the thing that you want to turn it into.
Beautiful, just beautiful metaphor, because I talk all the time about the blank page problem. When you sit down and you're looking at a blank page to write a piece of content or to, create a marketing piece or to write a book or create an outline, and it's like staring into the void. I mean, even though it's a white page, it's like looking into the darkness, at the abyss or something. AI, you can just give it a little bit and say, give me some ideas for this. And it just starts giving you things back and you can kind of play.
And you either hate it or you love it, or you go, that's kind of, maybe if you try this, and that's where the push and pull starts to come into play. But like I said, and you have to develop that creative director muscle to be able to direct it in that push and pull. And eventually you're going to take it out of its hands and you're going to finalize it and make it yours.
So, so you're saying you have to develop the creative director skill, and there are these new skills. They're not new skills, but there's this new skill set, let's say. I think that curator is another one of these that's very important, right? Because if you sit down to use Midjourney, you're no longer kind of designing and creating the art. You're kind of doing that, but you're just, getting a bunch of ideas and then like looking and curating from them and then following in a certain way. And so creative director is another one of these. I think coach is another one that, being able to explain and define things, very clearly. I've found I've been interviewing different people and I've interviewed philosophers, and it seems that philosophers are very good with AI because they have such precision with language. So they're these incredible prompters in a way. And so maybe we could explore here creative director. What does that mean? Because I think maybe to someone in the outside world, that kind of just sounds like you sit down and you just like come up with ideas and tell people what to do. But like what formally, just like we did with branding and like what is a creative director? Can you take us from the beginning? What are the, skills that we need to learn? And then how do you learn them? And how do you develop that part of you?
Yeah, one of the questions I get at, I've done some videos on how to be a creative director or what does creative director do, and they actually have turned out to be incredibly powerful in terms of SEO for my personal brand. And so I get a lot of questions about being a creative director, and a lot of folks say, they're like, I'm just getting out of school and I want to be a creative director. How do I become a creative director? Or do I, if I've had a long career in car sales and I really want to be a creative director in the movies. And you're like, okay, what people don't understand is that you have to be an expert in the doing of the thing that you want to become a creative director in. Meaning that they're like, do I have to work my way up as a graphic designer to be a creative director? Because I think I have, I know what looks good and I think I can really tell people what to do. And I said, I do not know a single creative director who did not come up through the ranks and be promoted from junior to designer to senior to art director to, to make it there. Because anyone being directed by that person has to have the respect of where they came from and their credibility and being told what to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think to a certain extent, and so to answer your question, what do you need to be a creative director? You need to have deep experience in the thing that you're going to be directing. And then also know what needs to happen in order to get it to a place where it's good. Meaning a creative director in graphic design might say, that font needs to be larger, that color needs to be brighter, there needs to be more contrast, the layout needs to look like this in order to have the communication hierarchy flow the way it's supposed to. Having those understandings of the mechanisms that you push and pull in order to get a thing to where it's going to function well or do the communication the way you want it to, execute the communication. That's what creative directors do. And then they direct others in how to make this larger, smaller, and so it performs the way it's supposed to perform most optimally. And I think that that's very much what creative directors or the creative director mindset that I'm talking about in terms of AI. And just so you know, Eben, this is the first time I've ever even talked about working with AI and having a creative director mindset. So this isn't like a concept that I've been playing with for a long time. It's actually something I just thought of it today, in fact. So
it's exactly right. And that's why I'm all over it right here, because so that's right. It's like if you want to, I heard that years ago that Napoleon knew how to do every single function in his army.
Exactly.
He could like cast a cannon, he could fight with a sword, he could train something, like he knew how to do it all. And then, he would have these big maps laying in a room and he'd just go in there for a week and crawl all over the map and then go, this is where I'm going to fight them, and then have the whole thing like, right. So as a mental model, you need to have the whole thing that you can simulate in your mind. And then you become really dangerous when you're, or let's say really productive when you're using these automation tools, because you know which pieces you can accelerate and which pieces you can accelerate and just the whole thing can be outsourced, which pieces you can accelerate and they're going to need some help, and which pieces you just don't even want to do it that way because it's better to do it yourself, right?
Yeah, totally agree.
Mm-hmm.
And because this landscape is shifting so quickly and so dramatically under our feet, knowing what you can do or can't do, or what is possible to do well, is different last week than it is this week. So that's also something that's kind of a constantly, we're relearning our own, language model through this whole process.
Yes, that's just very well said. We're relearning our own language model through this process. Mm-hmm.
Because someone who can't write well, yes, you can get ChatGPT to kick out an email, but it's going to read like a ChatGPT email, you
Yes,
know?
exactly.
And anyone who's worked with ChatGPT for any period of time knows what that email sounds like because we've had them spit out at us. And
Exactly.
so the question is, how do you get really damn good at it and can take them to a place, but then take it farther yourself so it's indistinguishable from before AI ever existed?
Yeah, so it's actually better.
Yeah, right.
It's actually better. Yeah, because again, just like Dolly or makes an image, you start to learn the signature of these things, and you go, oh, well, there's an AI image. It has its own kind of flavor. But then the better you get at prompting, the more you can have it make something that has its own flavor but is better because it is, rather than something that's like turned into, I don't know, packaged mush or something like that, right?
And what you were, I want to return to what you said a second ago because I don't think I really even answered your question, which was the curation aspect. And
Yeah.
I think that when I'm coaching people who are trying to build personal brands and I'm encouraging them to start developing content, a lot of them either are not writers or they don't like the sound of their voice, so they don't want a podcast, or they hate the idea of themselves being on video or showing themselves to the world on YouTube.
Yes.
And so they have a great hesitancy to putting themselves out there. And one of the baby steps to that I always encourage people to do to establish visibility and credibility and authority in your particular industry or category of business is to collect and curate content and reshare it on your social platforms with some sort of commentary or observation. Because what that's doing is you are taking something that you find interesting or poignant or important in your industry, and you are putting it out there for your audience or the people who are following that hashtag to see. But then you are offering in on top of it a thought kernel, some sort of a point of view on it that's going to then generate conversation. And that's a way of showing up and contributing a valuable thing, but without having to go the length of exposing yourself or your voice or your image in terms of developing content or even your writing, apart
Mm.
from whatever it is you're saying. And that activity of curation is uh, is an important activity in the fact that you are exercising your expertise in the
Mm-hmm.
choices that you're making.
Yes.
So the choices that you make are what is going to make your contribution valuable or not.
Yes. Yes.
And it's the same thing in AI, I think, really, is that how you are curating what it is that you are using or sharing or or utilizing, then that's what's going to show whether you know what you're doing or not, or whether you're actually contributing something of value, or whether you're just filling the world with more social media muck that doesn't do anything for anybody.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, beautifully said. So let's say that someone wants to build their brand, do some personal branding, make some content. Do you have any prompting tips?
Yeah, I think the most important thing when you're building your own personal brand, you have to start with the foundation. I have this tool called the personal brand wheel. It's I'm if you go to philipvandusen.com/pbw for personal brand wheel, you can download it. And it's a tool that I use with clients to evaluate and also plan how to build a personal brand. And it's broken into 4 quadrants and 12 pieces of the pie. It's kind of loosely based on the life wheel, which is a coaching tool that a lot of coaches use. And the foundation quadrant is really about establishing or at least codifying what your story is, what your purpose is, and what the value is that you're bringing to the table. Those are the real foundational elements that any business or person has to figure out and articulate, because that is what's going to drive absolutely everything that you do. It's going to
Mm.
drive where you show up. It's going to drive how you converse, what your point of view is, what kind of content you put out, where you distribute it, what kind of community you want to build, who your customer avatar is, what kind of conversations you're going to have, how you're going to prove your social value, or what kind of testimonials about your great work you're going to collect. That those foundational elements, what is your story, which is what makes you individual and kind of unique as a human or a business. What's your purpose? What's your mission? And then also, what is the value that you're going to be delivering? What is that transformational thing that's going to solve a problem for someone, change someone's life? You have to establish those things first, because those three things drive every single thing that you build afterwards. And so that's what I always coach people in terms of activity to do when they're developing a personal brand. And those are not things like go build a website or do a social media platform or like create a YouTube video or start a podcast.
Yes.
Those are strategic decisions that you
Yes.
have to make, that are literally just like, write this on a piece of paper, because it's those decisions that A, define who you are, and B, you're going to have to follow consistently for years. And so
Yes.
you better be very, very sure about what you're doing.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're
Yeah.
just spinning your wheels and doing a whole lot of activity that's going to do nothing but confuse people as to
Yeah.
what you're doing or why you're there.
Can you tell me a story of how maybe you prompted something to build your brand?
Yeah. I mean, the one thing I would say is, when I was first starting off prompting,
Yes.
is that the most important thing to do is you have to tell uh, the machine how, in what kind of personality and what kind of state do you want them to respond to you with. Meaning, one of the best things you can do is say, acting as a branding consultant who specializes with small businesses and coaching creative entrepreneurs, what would you say to this question? Or how would you answer this question? So it's basically saying, this is the person or the sort of mindset I want you to take when you answer the question to me. You can just ask it the question and saying, what's the best way to do social media marketing? And it's going to go and it's going to scrape a 10,000 websites and it's going to give you a super generic answer, which isn't going to help you do anything.
Yes.
But if my audience are small to medium sized businesses and creative professionals who need to use social media to get clients, if I say, acting as a branding consultant who coaches creative professionals and works with SMBs in branding and strategy, what is the best way? Yeah, how would you recommend to my clients that they use social media for marketing and getting more clients? You will get a completely different answer
Yes.
if you tell it how to formulate or what personality to take when
Yes.
it's responding to you. And that was one of the biggest aha moments that I had. And
Wonderful.
one of the great
Thank you.
things about ChatGPT is, if you pay for it, you don't have to do that every time. Meaning, you can populate the preferences within ChatGPT to say, every time you answer a question for me, come from this place, act as this person, understand that this is my business, this is who I talk to, this is the value I deliver, these are my key kind of reasons for being, this is my mission, my purpose, and my business. When you answer questions, use that as the context. Because for a period of time before I decided to pay the $20 a month or whatever to pay for ChatGPT, I had to type that every time, and that was like a nightmare.
I love to ask this question. Do you think that generative AI ever wakes up and becomes sentient? And if so,
I
then what happens?
Yeah, I know that there's a lot of people who are a lot smarter than me in machine intelligence who are saying that that will happen, and that we are in extreme peril if those sorts of things are hooked up to anything that is um has destructive capabilities. And for the most part, that means the military or the military industrial complex. How are they going to use this to make their machines faster, smarter, better killers? you know and that's I try not to think about it, because that would keep me up at night. And I've listened to enough podcasts of you know, uh, AI experts with their hair on fire saying, what the hell have we built? you
Yeah,
know?
totally.
And so yeah, I mean, there's definitely danger there.
Could happen. Might happen.
Skynet.
Skynet, exactly. All right. So, what would you say to someone who is
Let's get
hearing
on a
this and
happier note.
yeah, exactly. So, what would you say? Yeah, what would you say to somebody right now who is hearing all this and saying, you know what, I need to work on my creative director powers, and they haven't come up through the ranks and whatever. What could someone do using generative AI to just start, doing the Pareto 1%, or 4%?
Uh, I'm a, whenever I'm coaching anyone and they're saying I want to start building my brand, my business, I say you have to become visible and you have to start. I mean, it sounds like the stupidest thing in the world, but it's like you have to start. You can sit there and think about it forever, but until you actually start getting in the sandbox and pushing some sand around and trying to form something out of it, you're not going to learn anything. So you just have to get in there and start trying to make it do what you want it to do. And over time, you will learn how to do it better. Um, there is, there's no magic bullet to it. And, look, Eben, I'm a creative director. I've been a creative director for 30 plus years, right? I got in there in ChatGPT. I don't know what the hell was going on. I was just as much of a newbie as anyone else. I knew how to write. I knew what my business was about. I knew about how to give direction to a copywriter. So that put me above maybe some people. But when it came down to it, I was just like everybody else. It was like when the first people experienced Microsoft Paint, right? The whole world got Microsoft Paint at the same time. Anyone who had a personal computer, right? And suddenly everyone's dad made a garage sale sign and then they said they were a graphic designer.
Yes.
And yeah, right.
Yes.
But we all just got in there and started playing around with it. And that's where we are right now. It's like the whole world is getting in the AI sandbox and playing around.
Yeah. Philip, thank you so much. Awesome, awesome conversation. I really enjoyed it. I took a ton of notes. We'll put some links to your work down here. Everyone, go check out Philip's work. And thank you again.
Thanks, Evan. Thanks for having me on the show. It was great.
So thank you for watching another Metamind AI interview. Remember to keep practicing prompting, keep learning, get our prompt pack and quick start video, watch our other videos to learn from other AI experts, and stay tuned to us here on Metamind. Stay subscribed because this is going to get really interesting.